All right, NBA fans, it's time to break out the dynamite and talk about which teams need to blow it up this offseason. Today, we're talking about the Bulls, Rockets, and Wizards, three teams that had a very disappointing season in 2015-2016. Joining me is SI NBA writer Ben Golliver. Ben, let's start here. Which of these three teams, the Chicago Bulls, the Washington Wizards, and the Houston Rockets, do you think had the most disappointing season this year?
Oh man, that's a tough question. I think probably the Houston Rockets, just because of where they were in the postseason last year. On the brink of the finals, sort of. I mean, they weren't really that competitive in the Western Conference Finals last year, but still to fall from there all the way back to where they've fallen this season, it's a complete disaster. And I think for the summer, I mean, they really got to think seriously about moving on past Dwight Howard. I think that's always been a question. I think there was talk at the trade deadline, would they move him? And I think it's become pretty clear personality-wise. The track record here is long enough between him and James Harden. It's just not a functional pairing. It's frustrating for their front office after working so hard to land Dwight Howard. I mean, remember all the crazy pitches they had with Hakeem Olajuwon, all these great centers, Yao Ming. I mean, they were really throwing everything at Dwight. 3 years later, it's almost time to cut the cord. So I think Houston really has to get serious about retooling completely around James Harden. And they really have to kind of get through to him about what his summer is going to look like. He needs to come in much more committed next season if they're going to get back to that playoff push like they had last season.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that Houston had a very disappointing season. For me, at least, I look at Chicago. They were so great with Tom Thibodeau. I mean, we think back to that 4-year run where LeBron was in Miami. I mean, that first year, Derrick Rose was MVP and the Bulls were the first place team in the Eastern Conference. They finished first a couple times in that stretch. This has been a team that's been so good for so long. Jimmy Butler's, emerged into a superstar type player. Derrick Rose finally gave them a healthy year this year, whether that was a plus or not, I guess, remains to be seen. But the front office took such a big gamble bringing in Fred Hoiberg, letting go of Tom Thibodeau, one of the most successful coaches in NBA history, really. And, you look at last year, they had a 2-1 lead on Cleveland in the Eastern Conference semifinals. It took an insane LeBron buzzer beater to, stop that series from going to 3-1. They were so close in that sense to being, an NBA Finals participant last year to now going out of the playoffs. What do they do with Pau Gasol? Does Derrick Rose and Jimmy Butler, work together? They have to answer all these questions, and they also have to take a good hard look at, was bringing in Hoiberg the right decision? I'm not saying they need to let him go. I mean, he certainly has a lot of room to improve. It was only his first year in the NBA, but it's just really disappointing to see Chicago go from top of the Eastern Conference every single year with virtually the same roster to now, near the bottom, and they're dealing with Joakim Noah's injury problems. There's so much going on there. It's really a shame that team never really broke through. So
yeah, there's no question big changes are coming in Chicago. I think Noah's going to be gone. I think they're going to probably move on past Pau Gasol, and I think they really have to look at the Jimmy Butler, Derrick Rose pairing. The last time I checked, those guys were getting outscored when they're on the court together. If that's your superstar tandem, that's a big problem. Look at the best superstar tandems around the league, whether it's Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, Steph Curry, Draymond Green. When they're on the court together, they're winning handily. So that tells you right off the top, Chicago's got fundamental issues. I mean, to me, if I was running the Bulls, I would basically move past Noah, move past Gasol. I would try to trade Derrick Rose if at all possible. I'd rebuild the whole thing around Jimmy Butler and some of these younger pieces. But that could mean another step back next year, and that would be tough to swallow because, like you already mentioned, they took a huge step back this season. And really, on paper, they're probably the second most talented team in the Eastern Conference. So to finish where they finished, it says a lot about their chemistry and also their coaching staff.
absolutely, just a total disappointment from top to bottom. So, we talked about the Rockets. They probably need to move on from Dwight Howard. They really need to get a full committed season from James Harden on both ends of the floor. Let's talk about the Wizards a little bit, who have a superstar in their own right, John Wall, still playing at a high level. But Bradley Beal, he has his own injury problems. He said he might be on a minutes restriction for the rest of his career. This was really supposed to be the year Washington maybe took a step forward in the East and became, that attractive landing spot for a big free agent, maybe Kevin Durant. Obviously, those rumors have been out there. What are some realistic things maybe they can do to tinker with their roster?
I think they had the right idea, changing styles, trying to spread it out more, go small. And I actually like the core pieces that they've assembled, whether it's John Wall, Bradley Beal, they've got Porter. You look at Markieff Morris and Marcin Gortat. On paper, that's the kind of lineup that should really be able to do consistent damage if they can play big minutes together and everybody stays healthy. As you mentioned, Beal's the big question mark. So they're going to have to really carefully monitor him going forward and see if you can get these guys healthy and on the same page. And maybe the second year going through of the new style where you're playing faster, where you're spreading it out, you're taking more three-pointers, maybe it's more successful this time around than it was this past season.
I agree. You look at the pieces on their roster, Otto Porter, Markieff Morris, Bradley Beal. That's kind of the nucleus of a modern NBA, wing rotation. I think there's definitely some interest, in the Wizards roster. It's surprising. We talked about talented rosters in the East. I would have put Chicago and Washington right up there at the beginning of the season, but obviously that didn't pan out. We'll have to see what happens this summer. Anyway, that's all for now. We'll definitely be back talking NBA on SI.com. Stick with us, and thanks for watching.